In this video, you're going to get a high-level overview of how we'll be using Git and version control to track changes to our application over time. For the moment, we're going to stick with exploring this via a visualization. In the next lecture, we'll actually run commands from the command line to integrate Git into our project. So with Git and version control typically comes a lot of confusion. That's because there are a lot of new terms we're going to need to define and concepts we're going to need to explore. Once we're familiar with the basics of how Git is going to track our files and manage our project, it'll be a lot easier to run the commands in the next video and actually understand what's going on. For this example, let's imagine that we have a new project. So I create an empty directory on my machine, and we'll say that I'm building a Node application for serving up a portfolio website. Now I decide that I want to use version control with Git, and the first thing I would need to do is run a command to initialize Git in that new project folder. We'll talk about what the command is in the next video, and you'll actually run it, but for the moment it's enough to know that you have to start up Git in every project where you want to use it. Now once Git is initialized, you can start to add files into your project, and that is where these 4 columns are going to come into place. We have untracked files, unstaged changes, staged changes, and finally, we have commits. Let's get started with the first column, which is untracked files. So by default, Git doesn't track files you add to your application. You're going to have to run commands telling Git that you want to track specific files. So if we were to add a couple new files to our project, they would show up as untracked files. I'll add source/app.js, a Node.js script. Then down below, I'll add readme.md, a markdown file which contains the documentation for our project. So by default, all new files you add to your project will show up under untracked files. Now at this point, we can start the process of getting them into commits. When something has been committed to Git, Git is indeed tracking it, and that's a 2-step process. The first thing we do is we move everything we want to commit over to staged changes. So this is where we put things we want to save, and then when we save, all of these things get bundled up into a commit. Let's go ahead and see what that really looks like. So we would run a git add command, which we'll use in the next video. This is going to allow us to take one or more files from untracked files and bring it over to staged changes. In this case, I'll just bring one file over, leaving the other in untracked files. I could bring both over if I wanted to, or I could just bring over the one. Now from here, as I mentioned, staged changes contains the things that are going to be included in the next commit, the next save point, if you will. The next step in the process would be to actually create a commit using the commit command, which we'll also use in the next video. When we use the commit command, it's going to take all of the files in staged changes, in this case, just the one. It is going to bundle them up into a single commit, and that is going to show up over here. Now, each commit has a unique identifier. In reality, it's a bit longer than this, but for this, I've picked a random set of characters, 1AB49. So after running those 2 commands, git add and git commit, we would have a setup that looks a little bit like this. We have a single commit tracking some changes to our project, and we have a single untracked file, readme.md. Now let's say we're ready to continue on with the project. We add a new script into the project, and as we know, that's going to show up under untracked files. So I add geocode.js in the source utils directory, and that's sitting right here in untracked files alongside of readme.md. Now we've included this new script in the project, and it's time to use it. So we make some changes to app.js requiring this file and actually calling the function it provides. When we make a change to a file that Git is already tracking, that comes in under unstaged changes. Now, what categorizes a file that Git is tracking? It is a file that has been included in a previous commit. In this case, source/app.js was the only file included in the only previous commit, so this would be the only thing currently under unstaged changes. So now, at this point, we're going to make another commit. Remember, that's a 2-step process. We bring the things we want to commit over to staged changes, then we make the commit taking all of this and bundling it up in a new commit. So right here, I'm going to use the add command once again to bring two things over to the staging area. I'm going to bring over source/app.js, and I'll bring over geocode.js from the source utils directory. Now I could also choose to bring over readme.md, but I'm leaving that there to let you know you don't have to have git track everything. So once the add command is done, our setup is going to look a little bit like this, and then we can use the commit command to take all of this and create a brand new commit. So right here, I use the commit command, it bundles up everything in staged changes, and it puts them in a new commit. Now at this point in the process, we have two commits inside of our setup. We can revert back to those commits to get the application at that point in time. So at this point in time, with the first commit, we had a single file, app.js, in its old state. With the second commit, we now have two files. We have geocode.js and we have app.js in its updated state. As we continue to add new features to our project, we can create new commits, and those will show up over here alongside of our two initial ones. And that's where we're going to stop for this video. The goal of this video wasn't to get us to the point where we've mastered Git. The goal is to just get us familiar with a couple of basic concepts related to Git. Things like untracked files, which are new files added to the project. Unstaged changes, which are changes to files that Git is already tracking. Staged changes, which are things that are about to be committed, and commits, which are the various save points as we've built out and changed the files in our application. In the next video, we're going to put all of this into practice and actually run Git commands from our project. I'm excited to get to it, so let's jump right in to the next one.